man in Al-Qaeda was assassinated by a drone strike in Kabul. And while in Pakistan the main issue is the extent to which Pakistani intelligence agencies were involved, the question in front of us, which is more important and pertinent, is how do we understand Islamic fundamentalism? We could widen the subject to include all religious fundamentalism, but I think that for the moment, given the politics of the Middle East, we will try to focus only on Islam. You will forgive me if you come from a society that has already confronted Islamic fundamentalism in one form or another, that you may already know much more about this subject than the presentation will perhaps provide. But on the other hand, there are many people who come from societies with technical experience of Islamic fundamentalism. And hence I try to pitch this subject somewhere where everyone can benefit at least a little bit and not feel completely at sea. Now the main question that confronts us is that recent academic discourse coming from the West has really obscured this question in a way in which it was not obscured in the past. In the past, that is in the 60s or 70s, the left had a very clear, or even earlier than that, beginning from the period of the Third International, the left, and especially the Marxist movement, had a very clear-cut understanding of what such movements represented. That understanding was derived in part by the experiences of the European Enlightenment. Or in fact, I should say, the intellectual political struggle from the Reformation till the French Revolution. And that was a struggle against the intellectual hegemony and dominance of the Roman Catholic Church, which Engels famously declared as being the very foundational institution of European feudalism. This idea, this notion, we have seen, was increasingly challenged when the hegemony of Marxism itself as the dominant form of anti-systemic discourse was dislodged in the Western Academy by a new trend that we often refer to as postmodernism, post-structuralism, or post-essentialism. So with this new discourse, the entire idea shifted from an examination of class to an examination of discourse. The question was no longer what class various social forces represent. The question was no longer what are the balance of class forces, which classes are confronting which classes. The question was no longer how to scientifically and objectively and rationally study these particular structures of power that were at the heart of all the narratives and discourse that we saw. The question rather became an examination of language itself, and in particular, the question of the examination of discourse. To give you a little idea of the intellectual precedents of this view, we would have to go to we'd have to go to France in the 1960s. In particular, we'd have to look at years 62, 63, where French philosophy on the left made a very large detour from what was still then the dominant discourse amongst the French, which was Marxism. So with Foucault, Jacques Derrida, Lyotard, and many others, we got the emergence of what we broadly define as postmodernism. And as I've already said, the emphasis now shifted from the structure of power to the structure of language. And the question that they wanted to ask was not who really objectively is in control, let's say, the economic resources or the means of reproduction, or who is in control of the guns, the power in society, the state, and so on. But the question became what are the various dominant discourses, and who is included and who is excluded in binary forms within that dominant language. This, of course, took on a Hegelian terminology, the terminology of otherizing. So if you examine a given narrative, they argue, the narrative will always define itself in relation to sometimes an invisible and in other times an obvious other. This is what Derrida referred to as the metaphysics of Western philosophy. His view was that since its very inception amongst the Greeks, although I contest the view that the Greeks ought to be considered part of only Western philosophy, given the extent to which they influenced Muslim philosophy. But nonetheless, Derrida's idea was that Western philosophy has defined everything in terms of two binaries. Everything that is defined in terms of what it rejects, which is the other. In fact, Derrida, in my opinion, is merely paraphrasing, and that too, in my opinion, very badly. He's paraphrasing Hegel. He talks about the unity of opposites. That is, when we talk about defining something, we talk about the word definition itself means a boundary beyond which we say something else exists. In fact, we can only, according to Hegel, define one thing in relation to another. You can never define anything in relation only to itself, because that would be, of course, a tautology. If I say Taimur is Taimur, that would not make any sense. It would not tell you anything new about me, except what you already knew. What you need to know is what distinguishes Taimur from everybody else. That is what makes Taimur Taimur and not everybody else. Derrida thought this was a problem. Hegel did not think this was a problem. Marx did not think this was a problem. In fact, both thought that this was absolutely true. That's why Engels includes it as one of the central laws of dialectics. In fact, he calls it the first law of dialectics, the foundation of which arise the other two laws. But we won't get into that. So the idea here now for Derrida was that he wanted to problematize. In fact, the word he used is not problematize. He used the word deconstruct this binary. That in fact, all the problems that we associate with Western civilization, including imperialism, including sexism, including colonialism, including capitalism, can somehow be traced to the metaphysics of Western philosophy and its foundation in the creation of these binaries of discourse. So now, to destroy this binary, Derrida argued, you needed a category, something that existed neither in the one nor in the other, neither dead nor alive, neither day nor night, neither male nor female, neither proletarian nor capitalist. These were the categories, intellectually speaking, that in Derrida's view deconstructed the binary precisely because they were undefinable, because they were hidden. The application of this idea to politics, one aspect of that we've already seen with respect to the direction in which race, gender, and identity politics has gone in the West. That is the entire effort in undoing patriarchy, or in undoing racism, or in even undoing what they call classism, is really focused on attempting to somehow or the other problematize, deconstruct, make it impossible for you to distinguish between these minorities. The same idea and notion, of course, was also applied, but with very mixed results, and not with any degree of intellectual power, in part because the people who were applying these ideas were very unfamiliar with the subject to which they were applying to. And hence, from their point of view, the entire Western corpus of literature, language, art, philosophy, economics, politics is imbued, is, what's the right word, penetrated by this particular binary contradiction between the East and the West. The great champion of this view, of course, who popularized it first and foremost, is Edward Said in his now very famous and important book, Orientalism. And since his own grasp of the Palestinian question is much more sophisticated, and the Arab question in general is much more sophisticated, and since his sympathies were very clear with the national liberation movements of the Middle East, he also carried the necessary authority to make his argument more strongly within the Western. Now, the consequence of this idea that this binary between the East and the West must be broken down in order for the imperial project that we refer to as the War of Terror disintegrate, has resulted in the notion that we must work towards an anti-essentialist politics with respect to the binary between the East and the West. It has led to the conclusion that modernity ought not to be considered an advance of history. And it is even led, in many circumstances, in England as well as the United States of America, of an uneasy alliance, tactical alliance, I would say, between the postmodernist left, if we can call it that, and Islamic fundamentalists that exist within those. And I think this is a very uneasy alliance, because naturally the postmodernists are very much in favor of sexual freedoms, LGBT rights, and many other forms of freedoms that Islamic fundamentalists would find absolutely abhorrent and wrong. But the alliance is also at a philosophical level, because both have a certain aversion to the idea that science can be done, or that science ought to be the foundation upon which we should examine. Marxism, on the other hand, argues that we have to examine ideas always in relation to both, and I say both, the material and ideological contradictions in a given system. The comrade from Basque made a very good comment in the morning, very important comment in the morning, about the ontology of Marxism, the connection between theory and practice. And any deep reading of Marx, in fact, will show you that Marx was not only concerned about the material contradictions that existed in any given society, but he was also very much concerned and took great pains at discussing, understanding, and explaining the philosophical and ideological contradictions. But he always did so in a way in which he showed the connection, or albeit loose and dialectical, between a set of ideas and its material foundation. I can tell you, for instance, a wonderful passage in which Marx says that the ideological development amongst Greek philosophers, in his opinion, far outstripped the material foundation of that society. They went beyond what was really the material foundation of that society. And I can tell you also that in their opinion, Roman civilization, in fact, was the very opposite. They are nonetheless thinking of the Muslim world as quote unquote the other, as an essentialist idea. Thereby, they are in fact contradicting themselves by thinking of the Muslim world as the other. In other words, a sort of uniform entity with no differences, contradictions, classes amongst itself. And this leads to the mistake of thinking that Islamic fundamentalists, because they are the most authentic, quote unquote, and I put that in quotation marks, representatives of that civilization, are in fact representatives of that civilization as a whole. A grave error that one can demonstrate by examining the history of Islam that was never written. The clergy, in fact, was far less powerful in the Muslim world than it was arguably in the Christian world. But we won't go into those details too much today. So Marxism is open to examining the internal contradictions within the Muslim world. It is sensitive to that. It invites you to do that. Because we believe that you cannot understand Islamic fundamentalism merely by referring to the West. In fact, you can only understand Islamic fundamentalism by looking at what's going on within the Muslim world. I will advance the thesis to you that Islamic fundamentalism represents the class interests of those former ruling classes that were destroyed by colonialism and by the march of modernity. To give you a hook in which you can sink your teeth, let me elaborate for you how this term fundamentalism even came about. It was in the late 19th century, particularly after the work of Charles Darwin became more and more popular in the English-speaking world, that sections of the Protestant religion attempted to rethink Christianity in such a way that they would make it compatible with Darwin, with the theory of evolution, and with several other scientific advances of the 19th century. He had a very important argument that what we call Islam, and he had tons of historical evidence, that what we have inherited as Islam was really created, he said, in the 9th century. Not in the time of Muhammad. Because in the 9th century, the Abbasid Empire, the Abbasids had taken power from the Umayyads. And the Abbasids rethought all of Islam, what it stood for, what it didn't stand for. And that's what we inherited. And so he says, in fact, what we think of as Islam is really Abbasid religion, not really Islam. We know a lot less about Islam than we really think. In my view, it's quite on solid ground. I can also include Muhammad Iqbal here. These are some of there are many others as well, but I'm just including those who are most well read in the context of South. This attempt to reconcile, on the one hand, science and religion, dividing the religious community, and on the other hand, the emergence of those who feel very strongly that religion has to be understood literally the way we understood it for thousands of years, and that this new revision of literature, let's call it revisionism, this new revision of literature of religion is wrong. So those who think that this revision of literature is wrong refer to themselves in the context of the US as Christian fundamentalists. They took pride in that. And here you can see a picture which says T.T. Martin Headquarters Anti-Evolution League, the conflict held in a high school. And you know that these people then later went to court in the United States to challenge whether biological evolution would be taught in schools. There the Baptist which is why later the Iraqi CP was so anti-Saddam, because thousands of their people had been martyred by Saddam and his forces, that they in fact celebrated the destruction of the Saddam regime. Arabs, of course, traded as slaves, traded in slaves from the East African coast. Approximately 17 million slaves in the history of 1400 years. And so that itself colors how they look at African liberation movements. Absolutely right. Of course, you're quite right to point out that they were allied with Renamo, and we've seen what Boko Haram and others, etc. And we've also seen what happened in Sudan. I haven't spoken too much about Africa here, but you can easily see that the same analysis applies in much of Africa. So Palestine. So what was going on with the Islamic fundamentalists? Well, as you probably know, Nasser helped set up the PLO, and in fact was key in getting Arafat to become the head of the PLO, become the president of the PLO, and the PLO from that point onwards, after the defeat in 1967, became the principal organization that was challenging Zionist sector colonialism. And the PLO, of course, very much left wing. It was dominated by Qatar, of course. Second was the PFLP, Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, George Abbas, PFLP, Mahatma, the Palestinian People's Party. Where is the moment? There he is. I think So the whole PLO was a secular, left-wing national liberation movement. And Israel, of course, supported Sheikh Yassin, who set up a charity to undermine the PLO in the Gaza. That became very strong. And very quickly then the monarchies of the Middle East also began to support Sheikh Yassin to undermine the democratic balance. And they very explicitly, if you look at the historical documents, they very explicitly and openly said, we are not going to fight. Fighting the Israelis is wrong. PLO is wrong. We're only going to focus on the welfare work, etc., etc. Religious fundamentalists were all, as I said, all supported by all the monarchies now. The Jordanian monarchy was a very key element, of course, in supporting, in undermining the PLO, not just because of Black September, but even otherwise, in the way that they supported the Muslim Brotherhood. In fact, Jordan was very much the heart of the Muslim Brotherhood, when Egypt was not. In Pakistan, we saw much the same thing. We had Zulfikar Ali Bhutto come to power in a wave of left-wing activism. In fact, this is only half the story. In fact, I'd say it's not half the story, it's about 40% of the story. The vast majority of the story is that in Pakistan we had two massive waves of left-wing secular movements. One was in East Pakistan, the other was in West Pakistan. And in East Pakistan we had Sheikh Taimur Rahman, in West Pakistan we had Zulfikar Ali Bhutto. The Communist Party, of course, was banned in Pakistan. It had already been banned in 1953. And later, the Mazdoor Kisan Party emerged and so on, but back in the 90s, but MDP, my party, emerged only in the 90s, in 1970. By which time Zulfikar Ali Bhutto was already a major national figure in Pakistan. He was left of center. He was very much inspired by Gamal Nasser, as well as Nehru, as well as Sukarno. He was late in the day, he was late to the Bandhari party, but that's the party he wanted to have. That's the model he was following. So he nationalized 256 of the largest industries. He undertook a land reform in which about 100,000 people got new land, etc. Very minor in Pakistan. 100,000 is not a lot of people, given that we have 10 million peasant families. But nonetheless, he took some sort of a democratic reform. And I said to those who were very supportive of the regime, and I said to them, I asked them, why do you support the regime? They're normal peasants, like they're not religious fundamentalists. They're very supportive of the regime, but they're peasants. So why do you support the regime? And they gave a very interesting idea. So the idea was that there was, in the rural areas, there was a elite which was very much tied to the white revolution and the Shah. And the changes that occurred in the rural infrastructure in the revolutionary period undermined the original elite that was associated with the Shah. And you could see the rich farmers came to power, what we would call in Marxist terminology, the kulak farmers, etc. The rich peasant farmers, the rich capitalist farmers came to power. And they were very keen on the maintenance of private property. So I asked them, I said, what happened after when the revolution occurred? He said, well, many peasants, in fact, began to take over property automatically. But we support the revolution because, whereas on the one hand they got rid of the Shah elite, on the other hand, when the peasants began to take over lands, etc., they gave them land. And of course, Kemalism, the Hizb wants to recreate the Khilafat, and the recreation of the Khilafat is nothing but the recreation of the Ottoman Empire. There's really very little rethinking in the Hizb about what a new Khilafat would look like. It's a centralized state, and so on and so forth, and the center of it is, although they don't say it anymore, but it's going to be there. And the strategy is to infiltrate into the military in order to turn the state from within. That's their main strategy. So no, they don't go for mass support, they don't go for mass movements. They infiltrate directly. In fact, they also infiltrated into the Pakistani military. Okay, so finally, to come to an end, come to a conclusion, so that there's enough time for questions and answers. What's happening to fundamentalism after the defeat of communism? Well, September 11th now split the fundamentalist movement. The fundamentalist movement was almost completely in support of imperialism before, and certain sections of the fundamentalist movement, following Osama bin Laden, began to oppose US policy in the Middle East. Now, but the objective of this, of those who follow Osama bin Laden, ideologically are identical to the objectives of those who follow US imperialism. There is no difference whatsoever at all. They are both a form of anti-Westernism. It's not anti-imperialism, it's anti-Westernism. But why do I say that? They want to create basically a theocracy. They want to bring in Sharia, and this is a very, very reactionary idea which will set back Muslims by several centuries in mind. They have no concept of the relationship of imperialism to capitalism. In fact, they are very supportive of capitalism. They often say, well, Muhammad himself was a trader, and hence trading is okay, so capitalism is okay. They are not anti-capitalist at any level whatsoever. Hence, in my opinion, considering them anti-imperialist would be totally wrong. In my opinion, and this perhaps helps to answer also the question about jihad. What is an anti-imperialist? Anti-imperialist is not somebody merely who disagrees with the political policy of Biden or of Trump or whatever. It's not about policy. Imperialism, says Lenin, is a stage of capitalism. Imperialism is capitalism. It's not like there's imperialism and there's capitalism. They're imposing imperialism, but they're not imposing capitalism. Wrong! That's exactly what Lenin was challenging in his pamphlet, Imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism. He said you cannot really be anti-imperialist without being anti-capitalist. That's the foundation upon which imperialism arises. That's what capitalism is. Imperialism. Okay? So those engaged in jihad have, against progressive forces, have learned the tactics of terrorism of the population. So this is what they used to do. In Afghanistan, they used to burn bomb schools when the BDP was in power. They used to poison water supplies. They used to commit their acts of terrorism. That's how they won. That's what they did. That's what Dinamo did. That's what the Mujahideen did against the PTPA. They attacked ordinary people. Those are the tactics they know. They don't know how to build a mass organization or presence or something like that. So when they turned their guns the other way, after thinking that they defeated the Soviet Union, they turned their guns the other way. That's what they started to do. They took terrorists. First in Sudan, etc., and then later on in other parts, and then finally, the World Trade Center. So that's what they've done in Pakistan. In Pakistan, they have been responsible for the death of over 80,000 people. They've attacked schools, they attacked churches, they have attacked bazaars, they have attacked universities, they have attacked places where parks, they have attacked mosques, they have attacked madrasas. There was a time where no week could pass without a bomb attack. Every week there used to be a bomb attack in 2012, 2012. Schools in Pakistan have snipers on their roofs now and continue to have them. They have what do you call it, bomb bomb barricades in front of them, so that if a bomb explodes, it absorbs the shock. It's completely changed Pakistan, that level of terrorism. So finally, fundamentalists do not participate in the class struggle of the oppressed. In fact, they undermine that class struggle. They focus on cultural struggles like women should wear the veil, etc., the hijab, etc.,